Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the show. Viv Buckland's back. We're talking about worry and anxiety. My name's Chris Sutton. This is Mental Conversations.
I'm unsure I can be so absent-minded.
Boom, and we're live. So here I am again, sat staring at the very happy, smiley, laughy face of Viv Buckland. Morning, Viv.
Morning, Chris.
Thanks for coming back. I didn't know if you would. I thought you might run away, but I didn't really.
If there'd been somewhere to run to, I might have gone.
So last time we talked about beliefs, and today we're going to talk about anxiety/worry. Now, I produce quite a lot of podcasts about anxiety. It's one of the subjects that people talk about the most, and it's one of the things people want to hear about the most, so they can try and overcome their anxieties. But I was so there's lots of stuff that's already like floating around, and lots of anecdotes and things. But one of the things that you've tried to help me with is about your expression is you're really good at anxiety, Chris.
Well, you are particularly exceptional at it.
But so I want to do but just right at the beginning. So what I don't want to do is get halfway through the podcast and go, oh, we've only got 10, 15 minutes left, and then introduce that and not have time to explore it. So we might do it kind of back to front and go all over the place as usual.
Yeah, absolutely.
But can you explain that phrase?
Yes, I can. Yes. It comes from a presupposition around people are not their behavior. So we have behaviors. They are things that we do. But our behavior is not who we are. It's not an identity. It's something that we just push out into the world. So behaviors can change. And when you accept that anxiety is just a behavior, then you also accept the concept that it can change. So one of the things that I say, not just to you, but to lots of people who go, oh, I'm an anxious person, or I'm a worrier, or is to get them to stop describing it as an identity. You know, when you think of yourself as, I am Chris Sutton, that's all right. You are who you are. That's a good thing. That's right.
Yeah.
When you think of yourself as, I am anxious, then it's defining you. It's almost like it's set in stone, and you always have to be that way because it's part of your core identity. Whereas actually doing anxiety is just a behavior. And because you do it a lot, and you've done it a lot since an early age, you are particularly masterful at it. That's a great thing. If anybody ever wanted lessons in anxiety, I'd know where to send them.
But
it is just a behavior.
I was going to say the worrying thing is, I shouldn't use that expression. The thing is, I've got on my notepad in front of me, I've not written loads of things, and one of them says, being a worrier is part of my identity. That's one of my notes.
That's one of the first things that you want to change. I mean, we talk to ourselves. You know, sometimes we talk to ourselves out loud, sometimes we do it in our own heads, and some people think they don't have a voice in their head, and they just haven't really recognized that that's what thoughts are. It's the voice in your head. And if you keep telling yourself and other people, but even just telling yourself, I am a worrier, I am anxious, then you're just convincing yourself of the same thing. It's an affirmation that you're giving yourself.
Yeah.
And of all the choices for words that you could use, why would you choose to do that? Why would you choose to say, I am anxious, rather than I am grateful, I am kind, I am caring? You know, why wouldn't you choose those things instead? Yeah. It's not hard to choose to say those things, is it?
I think it's what you've said to me before, and perhaps on this podcast as well, is about that pathway that you create. And you've said to me perhaps often that, like, that I've got like a 4-lane motorway with no cars on it when it comes to, how do I feel about that? Let's feel worried about it. Let's feel anxious about it. And perhaps feeling confident and strong and convinced
Yeah.
that I'm going to be successful at it is like a weedy undergrowth that takes some kind of chopping through to get through to that side. But I think that for the first thing that it's made me think is like the power of your words, the power of your internal, your the monologue going on in your mind all the time. It's so powerful. It's so strong. So yes, it is. It does get to a point where you zip down that worry pathway and think those negative thoughts. But your question is the right one, which is, is it hard to actually go, actually, I'm going to think this, because you do have the ability to think something. Is whether you believe it or not is a kind of is the trick, isn't it?
Yeah, if you imagine there's lots of small steps that make a big change, you don't have to make one whopping great change all at once. You can take some small steps to change. And I think pretty well universally, of all the people I talk to, and I talk to lots of people and I ask them strange questions just because I do. One of the ones that I ask is, would you speak to anybody else the way you speak to yourself? And I think everybody I've ever asked the question to has said, oh, no, I would never speak like that to somebody else, because unless you're a fairly unkind person, you wouldn't normally say unkind things to someone else. Like, you're rubbish at that. You're stupid. Whereas the number of people who will happily say to themselves, oh, I'm just stupid. I'm just hopeless. I'm really unlucky. Okay. How hard is it for you to change the words? If you just catch yourself out using them, can you stop yourself?
Yeah.
And say something kinder? Because we're rarely as kind to ourselves as we are to other people.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, does it? They do like just
It
common sense.
don't make any sense at all. No.
It's like, I've had that thought before where you are, and I have spoken to people about it and said, it is weird because you would think of all the people in your life, all the friends, family, colleagues, whatever that you have in your life, the one person that you would think has got your back is yourself. And so
no, we're self-harmers. Human
yeah,
beings appear to largely be self-harmers.
yeah,
And I don't quite know why we're so good at it, but we are. And it doesn't take as much as you think it does to change. You just start with the small things, like what you choose to say to yourself.
So right. So if I because one of the things, like I've shared with you, I've written some stuff around anxiety and worry and shared
Yeah.
them with you. And one of the things that I've said in that what I've written is about how my feelings around anxiety as an adult are exactly the same as when I was a child. It's one of the things that I could like really hang my hat on. I don't, it's not like a distortion of memory. I know it's the same feeling, and it's such a weird thing to be able to think I could ever rid myself of that or reduce that. So I've kind of done so many therapies and spoken to so many people about, and I've moved forward with my life in terms of confidence, and I've done things in terms of speaking in front of large groups of people that I never thought I'd do. And there are things that I've done, but that feeling has never gone away. I've never been able to kind of relinquish myself from that. So is what you're saying is like to start that journey, obviously um, change that internal talk and try and say some more positive things about myself.
Well, I think the other thing with the feeling is your unconscious mind keeps running it because it has a purpose. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is to accept, notice. So first of all, notice the things that you say to yourself, notice the feeling, and then accept that it's there. Because it is. So you might as well accept it. That's really easy because it's there. So you can go, yep, it's definitely there. There's a difference between accepting it and judging it about whether it's good or it's bad, or you want it or you don't want it. So accepting it is just going, yep, okay, I acknowledge that it's there. And then the question to ask yourself is, so what am I getting from it? because I'm getting something from it. It's a habit that at a point in my life I started running as being the best resource I had at that time in that situation to deal with it. And therefore it did a good thing, because your unconscious mind is there to protect you. So it does things like when you trip over and you put your arm out, you don't consciously do it, you unconsciously do it. It's a reflex reaction. And that's kind of like anxiety and those feelings. At a point in time, that was the thing that protected you in some way. And until you establish a better resource than that, your unconscious mind will keep going back to that one. And it is your superhighway. So at this time of year, because we're talking in August on this particular conversation, and outside we've got really long grass in the countryside that might not have been cut yet. And if you imagine a field with really long grass, and you take your dog for a walk, or the tractor's been through it, and there's a path that runs through it, and you keep following the path because it's easy, because you don't have to fight your way through the long grass. So you follow the path because it's easy. It's the path of least resistance. That's what you do. And your unconscious mind always does that. To create a new and better path takes effort. So it start out with you're fighting your way through the long grass, and you have to persist with the new pathway and the new resource that you're creating until it's not an effort anymore, because your unconscious will always default back to that really easy path, the one it's familiar with. The fact that it's not serving you well is because it's just not serving you well. Once upon a time it did, though. It was the thing that it knew how to do at that point in time, and that was all right. And that's where the acceptance comes in. It was accepting that at that point in time, that was a good response.
Yeah.
And now to have more choices.
I think it's really key that for people to understand. And I listen to it, and it, I'm trying to take that in and trying to process it, and then I want to implement it. And then I'm like, well, actually, I have implemented that in, I just think it's going to take time. I just think it is going to take time, because it does seem to be like there'll be certain situations where it's like, even though it's not helpful now and it's an uncomfortable feeling, where I cling to it like a life raft, where I'm kind of like, oh, there's that feeling, and I'll just like, so I don't know, if I'm nervous about a big meeting that's coming up or something, I'll like go to the toilet 3 times in the 15 minutes before the meeting. So I'm like, well, it's going to be for an hour, and I'm like, but you don't even need to go, like what and then the feeling in the stomach, well, like comes up, and then it's shallow breathing, and it's kind of like my mind's not really focused. And then what generally happens for me, if it is something like that, like a work thing, I'm then focused at the meeting, and once I get into that focus, everything else melts away. And if I'm in that moment, then I usually perform well. So part of me always looks at it and thinks, oh, well, that's just part of my process. If I lost that part of the process, I wouldn't perform well. Do you see what I mean?
Well,
It's like,
yes, I do. I'm sort of laughing, not at you, but because I've come across it lots of times before. So it's like a strategy that you run. If I'm going to have a successful meeting, part of my strategy for this successful meeting is going to the toilet 3 times before the meeting. And therefore, until I've done that, I can't have a successful meeting, because that's what I need to do. Well, that's all right. But is it an essential part of your strategy? If you only went twice before the meeting, would the meeting still be successful? So you could try that and find out if it was, to find out whether your strategy is really working for you or not. And it is just a habit. It's not, but it's also anchored to the past. I've got this situation coming up. Therefore, the routine I have to run is, because this is the routine that is essential before one of these things. Well, I don't run that routine.
mm-hmm.
And I'll run a different routine. Is mine better or worse than yours? Well, neither, actually. It's just different to yours.
It's what it
the
is.
question
for you.
really is, does your routine serve you well? If it serves you well, then accept it. And if it doesn't serve you well, then change it. But sometimes we wound ourselves up about, oh, I've got this terrible habit. Well, okay, does it serve you well or does it not? If
Yeah,
it does,
and it
live with
hasn't,
it.
and I'm
And
still
if it
here.
doesn't,
It hasn't
change
pushed me
it.
over the edge or anything. That's really interesting because the thing that came into my mind was doing this presentation in this conference in front of like 200 odd people a few years ago, and I was pacing up and down outside waiting to go on to speak behind whoever was on the stage at the time, and a mutual friend of ours, Nicola Stewart, came up to me, and I was like pacing up and down, and she came up to me and did this kind of muscle man pose and went, "You are power, you are strength," like. And I was like, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And she was just like, she'll be listening, so shout out to Nick. But yeah, she was just kind of like, "You got this, you got this," And I was like, it's so funny, isn't it? Like that I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, like, what have I got to say? Oh God, I wish this feeling would go away. And she was like attacking it, and I felt like I was in defensive mode, just don't get it wrong. And she was like, go, it's amazing.
Nicola did two things perfectly for you. One was she interrupted your pattern. Your pattern was to pace up and down the floor and worry about it, and she interrupted that. Because actually, if you interrupt a negative pattern right at the outset when it's starting, you can mess about with that pattern of behavior so that a person stops following that path. And that's a useful trick that we use. But the other thing that she did was she gave you the muscle man pose, and your feelings and your physiology are intrinsically linked. And quite often we know that, but we think about it only in one direction. So, for example, if you were feeling bad, or if I was feeling sad, you'd be able to see that because my head would probably drop and my shoulders would roll forward, and there'd kind of be a slumped pose. And you would look at that and you would see from physiology, from body language, what the emotion was. So you know that they're connected. But what we think happens, or what we tend to think happens, is your physiology follows your feelings. However, it works the other way around. So the benefit of the strongman pose is if you adopt the physiology of confident, strong, and powerful, your feelings follow it. So sometimes it's hard to change your feelings. Most often it's easier to change your physiology. So it does make a difference whether you put your head up and back and shoulders back and square and confident.
Yeah.
It'll make a difference to how you feel because the two things are interconnected.
I'm changing my posture as you said that.
I can see you fidgeting.
I just sat up a bit. I was like, but funnily enough, because I was reading some stuff that I'd written about my own anxieties before this, it actually, so I had a wave of anxiety come over me before we've done this, and I think I'm on like episode 179 now or whatever of Mental Conversations, and you're just kind of like, why am I anxious about this? And so I was like, that's not even the way I want to like run the podcast. Is like I want it to be a fun thing. I want it to be a confidence thing where people can enjoy. So actually going into it with that right mindset. But you're right, sitting wise, and in fact, I know people can't see this, but we're doing this via Zoom and we can see each other. And I have done podcasts with people before where I've slowly slid, slowly, and I found myself literally ending up sitting almost sideways on the camera and not even realizing it because I'm maybe trying to do 15 things at once, seeing whether I'm still recording or what the time is, and trying to hold a conversation together at the same time. And then I've realized how stupid I must look, kind of thing. But I think when I'm confident and in that flow and just having the conversation, you're right, I'm probably sat quite upright and engaged, and there's eye contact. And so if you do those
when
things,
you feel when you feel confident, your body language follows it. But if you could start with the body language of confident, if you know what that looks like, well, start there and let the feelings follow it.
Yeah.
What's your physiology? What's your body language with anxiety? How do you have to sit? So, I mean, if I was standing in for you and I needed to learn how to do this,
I do this with
what would I have to do?
I do this with my kids. Honestly, we play a game. I say, like, play the emotion, and I'll say to them, put on your anxious face. And it's really funny seeing what a 4-year-old thinks is their, happy face, anxious face, funny face, whatever. But you would be small. You would your arms might be in, your arms might be
Shrink down.
folded. In fact, your shoulders would definitely be up. Your breathing would be quite shallow. So, your head, I don't know, you might have a furrowed brow as well. So there's quite a lot of
Okay.
kind of telltale signs there. Whereas if you're feeling confident, I'm doing it now, but like you'd sit perhaps with your arms open
You are. That's a
wider.
very open pose that you have
Yeah.
going on there, Chris.
and
But the thing is, if you know what your physiology looks like when you're anxious, and you begin to realize what that is, then next time you notice anxious popping up, move your shoulders.
yeah,
Don't allow them to crunch forward and roll forward, but actually think, nope, okay, shoulders back, and then
yeah,
notice how the feeling changes.
I'm going to do that. Tell people to do that and then let us know. Let us know on
Absolutely,
social
absolutely
media.
change your physiology. When we do a little well-being workshop, we're using NLP, and one of the things that I do in the workshop is something that demonstrates the connection with physiology. And I could ask you to do it now on Zoom because it would be quite entertaining. Normally I get people to turn their cameras off so it doesn't embarrass them. But it's just standing rooted to the floor with your feet sort of shoulder width apart, and as if you're grounding your heels, like you've got roots growing through your heels into the floor. Actually, to be there, you're going to have to stand up and do this, Chris, because then you tighten the calf muscles
Okay.
as that's
You
it.
can't.
Stand up for me. Oh, come on, you've moved off camera shot. So tighten the muscles in your calves.
Yep.
So that they're nice and tight, and then take that muscle tightness up through the thighs so that your legs are quite tight, rigid, as if you're going to go for a run or something, about starting a sprint. And then take the same tension up through your buttocks, because your gluteus maximus is a big important muscle. And then I don't know whether you can still see your six-pack or not under that t-shirt, but it's still there. Tense that up too, all the way up to your shoulders. Push your shoulders back so nice and square.
I hope
And
everyone else
then,
is
because
doing
you're
this as well.
really, really firmly rooted to the floor, tip your head back so that you're looking at the ceiling, and put a big cheesy grin, but it has to be all teeth. Like, it has to be a really teethy, cheesy grin on your face. And then either in your head or out loud, just shout, yes, 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 yes.
I'm not doing that out loud.
And notice how you feel. No, not out loud. Not on the podcast anyway. How do you feel?
Yeah, lighter, immediately lighter.
Because your physiology and your feelings are interconnected.
Oh, my
So all
shoulders
of
have gone down
the
as well.
all of the cells in your body are eavesdropping on what's going on in your mind. So if you're shouting yes, 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 and you've got a big cheesy grin and you're nice and tense and confident and shoulders back, it's pretty hard to feel depressed at the same time.
That was amazing. People, just rewind that by a minute, everyone, and do it again. Do it yourself, because that was pretty. That was really amazing. It is. It genuinely made me feel lighter. My shoulders in particular, they were maybe a little bit like scrunched together. There's one thing I wanted to talk to you about as well before, but we've got about 10 minutes left. It's experiences, and the fact that you'll have just read this thing, so I sent it to you this morning, that about confidence and almost like faking it till you make it. And maybe that's the same kind of pattern with your physiology, changing your physical shape. But I told this story to you about how I found these when I first started doing French in my first year at senior school.
Yes.
And I found, because it was a trickle or one book, and it was a textbook, and I'm the youngest of three, and both of my siblings had been through this course before. French first, year 7 French or whatever. And I found that they had the answer sheet. Well, they had their own tests, and they'd been marked. So I could see between the two of them, I'd got practically all the answers. And right from the very first time I ever did French, or the second or third lesson, I knew I had the answers to the test that was going to be in 10 weeks' time. And
Yeah.
I was like, so it's not like me to cheat at things, but because I'd got them there, it gave me the confidence that I knew I was going to get a good score. So I really relaxed into the lessons, and I got a good score. And then the second term or whatever it was, I just started using them less and less, but checking my own understanding against them. But the interesting thing about it was that I then decided to do French at A level. I went all the way through to A level.
Yeah.
I went and lived in France for a year when I was at university. I became better at Welsh randomly when I was living in Wales because I was like, oh, I've got a gift for languages, and I kind of tricked myself into it. And now when I do go abroad, now when not allowed currently really with COVID, but I'll always try and talk to people in their and try and pick up some words in their language. And all of that was based on a kind of safety net of confidence. And it's just a fascinating thing that's happened there.
It is. I mean, it takes us a little bit back to the previous podcast about beliefs. If you believe you can, then that empowers you. If you believe you can't, then it limits you. But I suppose faking it till you make it, acting as if this thing that I'm going to do or say is going to work out well, is a good way of describing it. If I'm going to act as if I'm going to go into this meeting and I know what I'm doing. I do know what I'm doing, and I'm going to act as if I know what I'm doing, because it's all about that presentation and that confidence and that congruence, I suppose. But when we're thinking about, especially when I'm talking to somebody about worrying about a particular event in the future, not so much a general worry about life in general, but a specific event in the future, what I do in coaching is we have a conversation and go, okay, take yourself to 15 minutes after the successful completion of the event. Say they're going to do a presentation. Okay. Take yourself to 15 minutes after the successful completion of the presentation and notice all the things that you can see and hear and how you feel and what's going to be going on, what's going to be happening around you. And we really talk about what's going to be going on after that successful completion of the event. And then suggest, okay, from that point of success, now just look back and see what it was that you did in advance in order to be successful. Notice the problems that you overcame in order to be successful. Because that does a couple of things. It tricks the unconscious mind, because your unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between reality and fiction. That's why faking it until you make it works. It works in stories, it works in metaphors, it works in symbols, but it doesn't know the difference between fiction and reality. So if you've ever sat and watched a sad film or watched Bambi, and you've found yourself telling yourself, stop crying, it's just a film. Your conscious mind is the thing that knows the difference between fiction and reality. Your unconscious mind, when it's absorbed in the story, doesn't know the difference. So if it latches onto the I've already been successful, I just haven't caught up with myself yet in time, then it makes the event much easier.
Interesting. Okay. I like that, because that I've never had explained like that, and I think that's really helpful to understand. So, if we try to actually put ourselves in that state as if it's been, whatever the event is, has been successful, then you just have to live it, don't you? Then you just have to live through that.
Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy once you know that it can be successful and you've been successful and you hear it all going on around you. If actually you then just look back and go, so how did I get here? Because, well, in a sense, it could be wishful thinking. And that in itself is useful, but it's more than just the power of positive thought. It is the looking back and going, okay, from this point of success, what were the obstacles that I overcame to get there, and how did I do that? Because it's a process, if you like, of active imagination, which is allowing your imagination to see all of the options that allow you to be successful, and then just choosing the ones that you're going to use that are going to work for you.
Yeah, I like that, because we've just got a couple of minutes left, but we're in the middle of the Olympics at the minute, and I don't know if you saw it, but Max Whitlock won the pommel horse. It was second time. Gymnastics was
very impressive. Yeah,
like it was incredible, and I was absolutely fascinated in the psychology that happened in that event. So I'll just talk about it really quickly. there were 8 competitors, and they were saying, the commentators were building it up, and they were saying the last 4 to go are the best 4, are the biggest competitors to Max. And Max,
Yeah.
he's drawn first. He's got to go first. And so it was like, so he went first and he nailed it. He did this amazing performance. And then
Yeah.
some of the others crumbled. Some of the real kind of favorites for the event absolutely crumbled. And then afterwards, I heard one of them, the Irish guy, was interviewed, and he was very young, and bless him, he hadn't fallen off quite, but he'd kind of, his routine was interrupted. He had to stop.
Yeah, stumbled.
And he said, I just caught a finger. That was, it's just, these are the margins, these are the tight margins that we live, in sport.
Yeah.
But how many times has he done that routine and that's not happened? How many times? So, and my thing was, when they asked Max afterwards, so you won the gold medal, God, I bet it was so, you bet you were really pleased when you were like going first. And he went, not really. He said, because if I'd known how everyone else had done and I'd gone 8th, I know I could have taken it easier. He goes, but because I didn't know how anyone had done, I had to go for it. I had to do my best routine and just make sure I nailed it. But then you could see everyone else's performance affected because he'd done this amazing thing first.
Yeah, and then you have to live up to it.
Yeah. And I was like, if they'd done it in a different order, he might not have been able to perform that because he'd have had the pressure of knowing he had to do that. And I was like, this is just fascinating for all of this, for how we perform in our day-to-day lives, whether it be big events or even small things. So much of it is in our head, isn't it? And is how we actually look at it. And
all of it,
so for me, and the whole purpose of this podcast is just, giving people that kind of knowledge that there is something you can do about it. There are things you can do by looking in your head.
And knowing that one small change begins to make a difference. Sometimes things look insurmountable, but they only do if you want to do it in one big step. Yeah. Actually, just take the first small step.
Brilliant.
And then the second step becomes easier.
That's it. And the third step is listen to this podcast and tune in again next month.
Absolutely. Should be step number 1.
All right. Well, look, thanks ever so much for coming on again, Viv.
It's been a pleasure.
Next month, we'll be talking about depression. So that'll be exciting.
Looking forward to it. That is a slightly surreal statement that I'm looking forward to talking about depression. But actually, I always look forward to talking to you, Chris.
Thanks again, Viv. And thank you guys out there for listening, as always. Please tell someone else about the podcast, and another episode will be winging its way to you soon. Thanks, everyone.